McLaren has recovered a lot of ground compared to Red Bull, with exponential progress which has been highlighted also by the lack of expected progress from the RB20 single-seater. However, it is not just the team from Woking that has grown significantly. Mercedes has also made up a lot of gap against the rivals from Milton Keynes overtaking Ferrari at the end of this first part of the 2024 Formula One season. In Maranello, they are grappling with difficulties arising from the latest aerodynamic development package, which was introduced at the Circuit de Catalunya in Barcelona, and which did not bring the expected step forward, but have rather set the SF-24 back. The two teams have ended up fighting each other, with almost opposite trajectories from the start of the 2024 Formula One Championship up to the Belgian Grand Prix, the last round ahead of the summer break. Mercedes' start to the season with the W15 had suggested a season mirroring the past years. The car did not provide reference points to engineers and drivers due to a very narrow operating window, and in the first months of the 2024 F1 campaign, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton were fighting with Aston Martin to be the fourth force. The turning point came in the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at the Imola circuit, also through small targeted updates to correct fundamental problems of the Brackley car, with exponential performance improvements that have made the W15 the third force in the last 5 races, recovering from the start of the season almost 4/10 per lap in terms of qualifying pace and even 7/10 on Sundays compared to Red Bull. The gain over McLaren has been 1/10 in qualifying and 2/10 in terms of race pace. The difficulties compared to McLaren and Red Bull remain in the medium-slow corners, where a rear end that has been problematic for the drivers since the beginning of the season does not allow maximizing the time in those sections. With warmer temperatures, the overheating of the rear axle makes the W15 less competitive compared to the two leading teams, and the performance suffers. The latest aerodynamic updates, introduced and discarded on Friday in the first 2 free practice sessions at the 7.004-kilometer circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, were meant to improve this complexity, but in FP1 and FP2, there was a lack of balance and grip also due to bouncing, and the updates will be resumed after the summer break with the aim of challenging McLaren on every type of track. The start of the season for Scuderia Ferrari turned out even better than expected. The anticipated fight with McLaren and Mercedes for the second position in the Constructors' Championship seemed to favor the Italian side thanks to a good winter development, and Red Bull did not seem so far away. In qualifying and race, the gap to the Red Bull RB20 of Max Verstappen was about 3/10, with the main difficulty being to warm up the tires for the flying lap. The first aerodynamic updates in Imola brought lap time improvements mainly by enhancing the aerodynamic efficiency of the SF-24, cutting the gap to Red Bull by over 2/10, and improving the qualifying and race performance of the Italian car by about 2/10. Ferrari's problems began with the introduction of the Barcelona aerodynamic package and increased difficulties in terms of qualifying pace on Saturdays. The porpoising triggered by the extra downforce added through the new floor troubled Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, especially with low fuel, when it is necessary to find the limit with a car that one must trust. This was no longer the case with the SF-24 single-seater, so much so that this hurdle worsened qualifying performance, the area where the car needed to improve the most in order to be able to challenge Red Bull and McLaren. Consequently, the strong point of the initial version of the SF-24 car, namely the medium-speed corners, has become the main weakness along with the high-speed corners, sections where Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz now lose a lot of time in qualifying and race. Using the McLaren MCL38 as a reference, 3.5 have unfortunately been lost on Saturdays and over 2/10 on Sundays. As a result, the updates which the Maranello technicians are working on, and which are currently scheduled to be introduced in September, most like at Monza in Italy or in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, will be crucial for the second part of the 2024 Formula One Championship, although clearly others will not stop their developments either, and returning to fight for victories will be a very difficult but not impossible task for the Italian side. After a dominant start by Red Bull, with 3-1-2s in the first 4 races, a new Formula One Championship basically began in mid-May. In the last 8 races, there have been 5 different winners from all 4 leading teams, and Max Verstappen has only won on 3 occasions. In the first part of the season, it was Red Bull setting the pace, with Ferrari and McLaren at a safe distance and Mercedes fighting more with Aston Martin than with the leading group. In the last rounds, McLaren has taken the lead, with Red Bull and Mercedes just behind and Ferrari chasing the leading group. With the cars approaching the peak of possible performance allowed by these regulations, every intervention on the cars must be studied carefully. It is no coincidence that McLaren has only introduced a new front wing since May, while Ferrari and Mercedes have encountered bouncing problems with the debut of the latest aerodynamic development packages. If we counted the number of updates brought by each team in every weekend in these first 14 races, we would find McLaren at the bottom of the list. The developments on the MCL-38 single-seater have been few but crucial, starting with the Miami Grand Prix package that promoted the Papaya car to the role of the first force. The difficulties in slow corners on straights and in the management of the rear axle in the first part of the season have been resolved, and the results have been seen especially on Sundays. 2.5 tenths have been recovered compared to Red Bull in the qualifying sessions, while this gain has doubled in race pace, where in the last 3 months the Woking car has been the one to beat. The weak point compared to Max Verstappen is in terms of qualifying performance, where the MCL-38 also suffers from lower drag reduction system efficiency. In Spielberg and Hungary, there were great improvements in the race phase in controlling the temperature of the rear tires, with consequent advantages at low speeds. As for the drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, they have not been on par with Max Verstappen. This weighs especially on the Englishman's shoulders. In his 5th season, while Oscar Piastri should be given more time to learn and has shown improvements in tire management to be validated in the second part of the 2024 Formula One season. The management of strategies and drivers will be an aspect to improve to beat Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, and it will be up to Andrea Stella, who has just signed a new multi-year contract, to show his capabilities as team principal in this area as well. Meanwhile, the Italian has announced that for the second part of the season, McLaren will have, at various times, some new parts, therefore launching the challenge to Red Bull. The start of the season by Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez had suggested another dominant year, although not as much as 2023, however, the development directed by Pierre Wache and Enrico Balbo has not borne fruit. Thus, the RB20 has lost much ground compared to the rivals, especially McLaren and Mercedes, who now challenge Red Bull on every circuit. The heir to the RB19 initially retained many of the positive characteristics of last year's car, and the results showed it from Sakir to Miami. Then, in Imola came developments that moved Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez's car forward, but reduced the operating window of the car, with negative effects also on race degradation, no longer what it was at the beginning of the year or in 2023. The numbers confirm the sensations from the track. The rivals have gained an average of 2 tenths in qualifying, while 4 have been recovered in the race. These changes mainly affected Sergio Perez, who had started the year very well, earning himself a new contract. With a more unstable car to tame, the Mexican has suffered a lot in comparison with Max Verstappen, so much so that in a few months his seat was very much at risk, only to be confirmed in recent days. The updates introduced at the Hungaroring circuit in Budapest did not bring the lap time expected. Now the Constructors' Championship is seriously at risk, and Max Verstappen cannot be calm in the drivers' standings if the team's trend in the second part of the season is confirmed. Currently, the RB20 maintains an advantage in qualifying that has allowed for better-than-expected results, but in the race, the MCL-38 has proven superior even on tracks less favorable to the Woking car.